You know, guys, it wasn't really that long at all when Republicans introduced their budget framework where they were calling for $880 billion of cuts out of the Energy and Commerce Committee. And we rightfully stood up and said, hey, you can't cut that much out of Energy and Commerce unless you are going to be making huge, huge cuts to our Medicaid programs. And Republicans got all bent out of shape. They said, you guys are crazy. We're not cutting Medicaid. We wouldn't do that to our people. You guys are lying. And now that we are seeing this bill make its way through the reconciliation process, now that we are seeing it come out of committee, what is happening? Oh, that's right. $715 billion of cuts straight out of Medicaid. That means millions of people are going to be thrown off their health care, all because these Republicans needed to get their big, beautiful tax cuts for Daddy Trump. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few details from these Medicaid cuts, and then I want to show you how Republicans are now shifting their message, saying that actually, guys, this is what the country needs right now. If you guys do appreciate my work, please do remember to subscribe.
A newly released plan from House Republicans would slash Medicaid spending by at least $880 billion. It would help cover and preserve about $4.5 trillion in tax breaks in President Trump's budget bill. Those were approved during his first term in 2017. They're expiring at the end of the year. A preliminary estimate from the Congressional Budget Office says the proposal would reduce the number of people with health care by 8.6 million over the decade.
Yeah, so it's exactly what we feared, right? These Republicans are trying to achieve $4.5 trillion in tax breaks. And how are they going to get there? By throwing 8.6 million people off of their health care. And I want everybody to pay attention to that 8.6 million people number, because the Democrats are trying to use another number. I kind of have a bone to pick with them about that. But these are huge, huge cuts. We are throwing the poorest among us off of their health care. Also, these Republicans can hand out more tax breaks to their wealthy buddies. That is what is going on here. Here is Steve Horsford just really calling out how truly devastating these things are going to be.
They can't even afford rent, let alone covering health care for themselves or their children. But do you see what they're doing? They're cutting health care for 13.7 million Americans, the largest cut to health care in U.S. history, to give tax cuts to billionaires and to big corporations. Yep. This is your priority. Live with it. Defend it. Speak about why it is you are doing this. Yeah. Because that is the consequence of your actions.
Yeah, and he's exactly right. Just think of how insane this is. Donald Trump was elected because he was going to come into office. He was going to give people more buying power. He was going to lower your housing prices. He was going to lower your grocery prices. He's going to lower your healthcare prices. But instead, what are they focusing on? $4.5 trillion of tax cuts to the wealthiest among us. And they're throwing millions off of their Medicaid to get there. And you'll notice he used the 13.7 million number here. And I want to dispute that. It's not necessarily 100% wrong, but the way that they got there was that the budget on its own is going to throw about 8.6 million people off of their health care, according to the Congressional Budget Office. There are also some subsidies that are expiring at the end of this year, which means there's going to be a group of people who will no longer be able to afford health care. And if you take that group of people and add it to the people who are losing their health care because of this budget, then you get between 13 and 14 million people who are going to be off their health care over the next decade. So it's not wrong to say that that's how many people will lose their health care over the next decade, but to say that the bill itself cuts 13.7 million, it's a little waffly. I don't think they should have used this number because, as you will see here with Dusty Johnson, it kind of just gives them a way to try to weasel out of the whole conversation.
Based on that analysis, the CBO said nearly 14 million Americans could lose their health insurance. Now, I know Republicans say that there's some changes to it, but people could lose their health insurance, including in your state. Could you support a bill that kicks some people off of Medicaid?
Manu, you have fallen for the trap.
No, this could impact people's insurance, could it not?
They asked specifically about not renewing the premium tax credit on the ACA exchanges. And so when you ask CBO a ridiculous question, you're going to get a ridiculous answer. But let's pare that down. Let's just say, okay, Dusty, maybe it's not 13 million. Maybe the Democrats cooked the books on that. But what about if there are 3 million? That means, to the extent that the Medicaid reforms are about making sure that illegal immigrants aren't on the program and that able-bodied people who refuse to work are kicked off, that means we've got millions of able-bodied folks who refuse to work.
So do you see what I mean here? Instead of having to address the core of the issue about how this budget is going to kick millions of people off of their health care, now you've got people like Dusty Johnson out there saying, oh, well, the Democrats, they must have cooked the books. There's no way this is going to be 13.7 million like they're saying. He just gets to totally skirt around the issue, and now we're having an argument that we do not need to be having, all because the Democrats use the 13.7 number, which is kind of right, but it's not really right when we're talking specifically about this budget bill. I just don't like it. I think they should have used the 8.6 million number. That is still a shit ton of people. It is still a huge, devastating thing for the people on or losing their health care. I think we should have stuck to that number and just, we of course they're going to try to weasel out of this stuff anyways, but now we kind of just give them an out because now there's a discrepancy in the numbers. Here's Andy Harris saying that, able-bodies, they just don't deserve health care.
More than 21 million people were added to Medicaid due to COVID. I mean, okay, the pandemic's over. Businesses have reopened. Should those people even be on the Medicaid roll still?
No, most of them are what's called the expansion population. So again, they are able-bodied, healthy people. They are not traditional Medicaid, which is there for the disabled, the elderly, pregnant women, children. Those are the people who should be on it. Those were not the people added during COVID. The people added during COVID were healthy people, and now we're not even going to put a real work requirement on those individuals. And again, most Americans believe, look, we need that safety net, but you don't have it for an able-bodied young person, living in their parents' basement who.
Yeah, because all the able-bodied people who are on Medicaid, they just must be a whole bunch of losers who are just living in their parents' basement, smoking a whole bunch of weed, eating Doritos, drinking Mountain Dew. These people are disgusting. I reject this line of thinking whole cloth. We already know that about 65% of people on Medicaid are working full-time or part-time, and the reasons why you're not working is because you might be providing caregiving for a family member or a loved one. You have a disability or whatever on your own. It's not that very many people that are actually just trying to take advantage of Medicaid to be on Medicaid. Most of these people, Medicaid is supposed to exist for the lowest income among us, right? This is supposed to be a stopgap. People aren't on Medicaid because they want to be on Medicaid. They're on Medicaid because they need some sort of health care to get by. That is what this whole system should be. But now you're hearing the Republicans coming out and saying, oh, all these able-bodied people, they don't deserve health care. It is so disgusting that we, as the wealthiest nation in the world, are one of the only G7 countries who don't provide some sort of universal health care for our individuals. And now we're going to kick millions of more people off just under this premise that able-bodied people are just taking advantage of the system. They don't actually deserve it. How about we start paying people more and maybe they could afford more health care? Maybe they wouldn't have to be on Medicaid if we had better paying jobs. It just really irks me. Here's Mike Johnson basically saying the exact same thing.
At the same time, we have to root out fraud, waste, and abuse. We have to eliminate people on, for example, on Medicaid who are not actually eligible to be there. Able-bodied workers, for example, young men who should never be on the program at all. When you have people on the program that are draining the resources, it takes it away from the people that are actually needing it the most and are intended to receive it. You're talking about young single mothers, down on their fortunes at a moment, the people with real disabilities, the elderly. And we've got to protect and preserve that program, so we're going to preserve the integrity of it in this process.
Again, the program is not only supposed to be there for pregnant women or young people. Like I just said, 65% of people who are on Medicaid are already working. And now these assholes are going to try to put in all these work requirements saying that, oh, you need to work, I think it's 80 hours per month. You've got to fill out paperwork each month, which is going to add a whole bunch of administrative costs. You're going to be kicking a whole bunch of people off the program who actually are entitled to the program, all because you are operating under this false notion that just a shit ton of people are taking advantage of the system and they're able-bodied people who don't even deserve it anyways. These people are disgusting. Wouldn't we prefer people to have health care coverage when they are working? They can pay their taxes, they can pay into the system, and instead you're going to try to kick a whole bunch of people off, and now they don't have access to health care, and when they get sick, maybe they're not going to work at all anymore. I mean, it's just all insane. It's all built on this delusion, this whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps, able-bodied people who are working, they don't deserve any of this, they can go out and buy their own private health care, and it's just not how our country works. Medicaid should be there for people who need it. That is the lowest income earners among us. That is how it is working today. And now they're going to be kicking millions off to give tax cuts to the wealthiest among us. Here's Mark Alford, I believe is his name, saying, actually, you guys, we have to do this.
Because 1 in 5 Missourians are covered by Medicaid. Roughly how many of them, in your view, would be deemed ineligible for these benefits or in your view, are committing fraud? Do you have an estimate, a rough number?
I do not. I do not have any numbers on that. I know that some people in the Show Me State are concerned, but it is a Show Me State, and we're going to ask people to show me. Show me why you should be using taxpayer money for Medicaid that's funneled from the federal government down to the state level. Look, we're not empty of compassion. That is not what it's about. I am compassionate about turning this country around. We are on the edge of going over the cliff from the debt that we have, $36 trillion. We've got to get this reconciliation passed. We've got to get the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act renewed and extended and make it permanent, or it's going to be the largest tax increase in U.S. history.
We got to do it, guys. It just has to be done. America's about to go over the cliff, and we just can't have these tax cuts expire. We got to make them permanent, guys. We got to make sure the tax cuts are in place. That is their argument. But we know that these tax cuts, most of the benefits go to the wealthiest among us, the top 10%. People on the lower end of the earning scale, they are barely going to benefit from these tax cuts. And then when you kick millions of people off of their health care, now they're even in a worse spot because now they don't have health care. And that, it just makes no sense, guys. It makes no sense. And for him to try to say that, oh, it's a show me state, they're going to need to show me. This is how our federal system works, you dumbass. We pay into taxes, right? We pay our taxes, and then that money gets doled out to different states for different programs. Medicaid happens to be one of those programs. It's one of those programs that is administered at the state level, and the federal government funds a little bit of it. The state funds part of it as well, and it comes together to make the Medicaid program. And so if you are going to try to rip all of this money away from the federal side, these states will not have the tax revenue to make up that loss. And these people know that. They know that. It's part of the plan. These people are just gross. They are taking away health care from the least fortunate among us to give tax cuts to the most fortunate among us. Do we really think that people like Elon Musk and Scott Bessent, do we need to give them more tax cuts? Or would it make more sense to increase our revenues at the IRS from these wealthy individuals and fund our safety nets a little bit better? What kind of country do we want to be? I, for one, want to be able to provide health care to people who actually need it. And as we know, most people on Medicaid, they need the damn coverage. I'm just flabbergasted by the whole thing. There is no humanity here. He tries to say, "Oh, we don't lack compassion." This looks like a lack of compassion to me. because you're trying to play under this story that it's just a whole bunch of able-bodied freaks who are just taking advantage of the system. It's a whole bunch of illegal aliens who are, committing fraud against the system. You're not providing any evidence that that is actually the case. And then you are using this to cut millions of people, millions of American citizens off of their health care. Make it make sense. These people are terrible people, and every single one of these Republicans, they've got to be voted out of office. I'm going to continue to say this. Each and every one of these Republicans need to be voted out of office. Not only do they not know how to govern, but these are their priorities. They are trying to take benefits away from the least fortunate while giving more benefit to the most fortunate. That is their philosophy. It's always been their philosophy, and they have tricked such a huge swath of the American people that they're actually working for them when they're the actual ones who are getting hurt most by this whole thing. And it is red states that will be hurt most by these cuts in Medicaid. That's just how it works. These rural areas, they are the largest consumers of these types of programs. Blue states are normally better off. And so they are hurting their own constituents after Donald Trump just got voted into office to make life better for these people. So these people can fuck right off, like I continue to say. I will leave it there for now, guys. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share it with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. We are trying to build something here on the left that adequately pushes back against the right-wing media ecosystem that just launders this horse shit for Donald Trump every single day. So if you do like what I do here, please do remember to smash that subscribe button. It is free. And if you guys want to see how Donald Trump is now going after his perceived enemies and arresting Democratic mayors, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, see you guys in the next one.